Nestled in downtown Richmond, Shockoe Slip brims with lunch spots, cafes, and shops. But 160 years ago, this peaceful corner of the city becomes the flashpoint of one of the most infamous chapters in Virginia history.
They broke the windows, they broke down the doors, they took what they wanted.
An act that some historians, like Mike Gorman, believe lights an early fuse in the movement toward women's empowerment in America.
I think it is absolutely the genesis of women as political actors in a very public way.
April 2nd, 1863. Rioters ransack warehouses along Cary and Main Streets.
A lot of the stores there that were nearby were broken into and entirely wiped out. Basically, if it was a store, it got looted.
Most of the culprits, poor women.
The kind of political tools that were available to women in this day were pretty limited.
Author and historian Meredith Henny Baker says the lawlessness is born out of sheer survival.
So there's shortages of housing. Inflation is rampant. Some things cost 10 times more than they did a few years before.
The bread riot, as it would be called, explodes while the Civil War rages on Richmond's doorstep.
I mean, it must have been absolutely desperate every day to survive.
A lack of food, poor working conditions, and refugees pouring into the city lead to the social fabric ripping at the seams. Desperate families starve.
This is a political act that they're carrying out. It's just not a riot. It has real implications.
Library of Virginia historian Greg Kimball says it all begins when street vendor Mary Jackson organizes a group of women to march to the executive mansion.
So being a market person, she sees a lot of people. She communicates with a lot of people.
Miss Jackson and her cohorts demand a meeting with Virginia's governor, to no avail.
Women took to the streets. Armed women went and protested, and it turned violent.
The enraged masses descend from Capitol Square onto the retail district below. Stores and warehouses filled with supplies, the target.
To say this is a rarity is an understatement. There isn't a word for it. This just doesn't happen.
Women who can't feed their families take what they can.
Dated April 2nd, 1863.
Letters written by eyewitnesses survive at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture.
And from there they went down on Cary Street and broke in the store next to Uncle William's and got all the bacon, soap, butter, brooms, and candles.
Anarchy and turmoil engulfed downtown.
By this time, various estimates of the crowd size had grown to about 5,000.
The shocking bread riot shatters the long-held myth of a docile Southern belle.
Not this gone with the wind situation where the ladies are at home fanning themselves and waiting for the menfolk to come back. They are active participants, and they are responding in their own way.
After nearly 2 hours, the city guard restores order. Ringleaders, including Mary Jackson, are arrested and jailed.
But a lot of the eyewitnesses to the event talk about how emaciated the people are.
At first, sympathetic Richmonders support the women, but leaders suppress newspaper coverage in Virginia.
This is a national event. This is being reported in New York and Philadelphia and other places.
Historian Mike Gorman says scapegoats are sought.
We can't even process this. They must be foreign-born, Yankees, prostitutes. You see that over and over again, the way they're described. But in truth, of course, this is heralding a larger issue that I think demands our attention.
With the Confederacy buckling under the weight of war, similar riots break out across the South.
They're unhappy and they let the leaders know.
But the Capitol's calamity was the largest act of rebellion by a segment largely ignored.
People that we never get to hear from, people that usually aren't part of written history. And here they are almost loudly proclaiming, this is what it's like, folks. Remember us. I find that incredibly powerful, and I think we should listen to them.
Following the upheaval, the government opens markets for the poor to buy food at prices they can afford.
This might be the kind of political action that we might somewhat be used to today, but back then, for it to occur at all is revolutionary.
I think it's important to remember the Richmond bread riot because the people at the time didn't want it to be remembered.
A footnote in Virginia history, the Richmond bread riot lasts just 2 hours. But Meredith Henny Baker says this often overlooked chapter in women's history still reverberates across the centuries.
Because it was a very a bold statement by these women, and their message was, if you're not going to help us, then we're just going to help ourselves.
For I Have a Story, I'm Greg McQuaid, CBS 6 News.